Football Manager 2025 has been delayed. They put out a press release last week saying the game will be delayed, only by around a month or so, to late November. But when you couple that with the fact that all of their press releases so far have started with what we're taking away from the game, you can understand why people are getting a little bit worried. But should we be worried about it? Well, first of all, we need to dive into why Football Manager 2025 has been delayed in the first place. And that's because they are completely building the game from the ground up in a brand new engine. They actually announced this in June last year before FM24 had even been revealed. This press release basically says they are moving to Unity because they've reached the ceiling of their current engine and they need something else to have more potential to build on the game. So this is all good. Over the next 10 years or so, they'll be able to use the Unity engine to do things they couldn't do before and make the graphics engine look a lot prettier. But a bit more on that later on in the video. Now, typically a bunch of us creators get invited down to Sports Interactive, the company that make Football Manager. We get invited down to their studio a few days before these press releases go live, and they sort of give us a presentation of basically what is in the press release. So on the day when they said to us that Unity is going to be the new engine, I asked them why Unity and not something like Unreal Engine 5 or another equivalent game engine. The answer I got back was basically Unity is the best engine for user interface development. And given that Football Manager is essentially a spreadsheet simulator, user interface is very important. So that's why they've gone with Unity. Anyway, Tom, what has all of this got to do with the game being delayed by a month? Well, to my understanding, Unity uses a different coding language to the engine that they used before. So basically, they can't just copy and paste everything over. It's all got to be rewritten from the ground up entirely. And obviously, that takes a lot of time. Probably a lot more time than they anticipated. Especially because in the 2023 blog post, they said that the original plan was to launch Unity for FM22, but because of the pandemic, they pushed it back to FM23. But because they had to work on the other games and also how long it was going to take entirely, they had to push it back to FM25. So obviously this has been a mammoth challenge for the team at Sports Interactive. I suspect in the early days when they planned to launch it for FM22, it was a bit of a shoestring team just putting things together, and slowly over the years they've got a few more devs working on it. I would be very surprised if they had more than 10 or 20% of the team working on the new Unity game until FM24 was fully launched and it had a patch or two. But let's be honest here, the truth is 99% of us watching this right now do not know how you make a video game, right? Let alone one as complicated as Football Manager right from the ground up. And I think anyone watching this can relate to that with their own job. People always think there's a lot less that goes into what you do than you actually do. For example, me as a YouTube creator, people just think I wake up, sit at my desk, talk to a camera and just upload to YouTube, and that's done. People don't quite realise that to make a great YouTube video, you have to come up with a really good idea and then frame that idea in a way that's going to be really appealing to an audience member and also make sure it's packaged well with a good thumbnail and title. You've also got to be really good at writing scripts that keep people engaged, so you've got to choose the right language, the right tone, make sure the pacing's all correct. Then you need to sound great when you're making the video, you've got to sound engaging. And then of course, editing the whole video up in a certain style to make sure it keeps people interested, has a bit of a hook of mystery in there to keep people watching, some tension, highs and lows, all the sound design that goes alongside it. I'm rambling here, but the point is, a lot goes into making a YouTube video that most people don't understand. I would imagine in the same way, making Football Manager, a lot more goes into it than I or you would ever understand. So am I worried that Football Manager has been delayed by a month? No, not at all. I think the issue is they've announced it's been delayed when I don't think they actually have announced that it was going to release in early November anyway. I think people just assume that because that's usually the slot Football Manager launches in. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I think if they had just said, hey, we're launching the game at the end of November on this date, and they didn't say it's being delayed, I don't think people would be bothered. I mean, I delay videos all the time. I always have an intended date to release a video, but sometimes it takes an extra day or two to get it all sorted because it's taken longer than I thought to make that video, for example. None of you lot are ever aware when I delay a video. Like, no one knows, right? So you're not bothered by it. So I would much rather they take their time to delay the game, make sure they iron out all the kinks and major bugs to release a fully functional game on launch day. Otherwise, it would cause reputational damage to the company and the game if it was full of bugs and unplayable. But I did mention they are removing a bunch of features, and should we be worried about that? Touchline shouts, social media screen and the data chalkboard, creator club, versus mode, challenge mode, and fantasy draft. They were all announced to not be in the game in the June update. And then last week, they did say that international management will not be a playable mode in FM25. Oh, of course, how could I forget the biggest one of them all? Players' weights will no longer be available. I'm so angry about this. Obviously, that was a joke, but there do seem to be a lot of people out there very, very upset by that, which I don't quite understand. I mean, this post on Reddit says it, right? 48.5% of players in the FM database have a weight of 0. If anything is set to 0 on a player's profile, it means it is just entirely randomized by the game when you launch a new save file. If you're seriously trying to tell me you only sign players based on weights, then you're playing the game wrong. Now, going back to the remove features, to be honest, I don't think half of them actually matter. Does anyone actually read the in-game social media? I think it's very unlikely. Although I do quite like the concept of it, I never use it. I never look at it. The chalkboard was made totally redundant by the data hub, I feel. This is way more useful and user interface friendly than the chalkboard. Creator Club can just be done in the pre-game editor, although I do appreciate that is harder to do than just pressing a button that says Creator Club in the game. I will miss the multiplayer options, but Fantasy Draft will be a mid-cycle feature release, so that will be coming at some point in FM25, hopefully as early as possible. They usually do like a January update in February, don't they, for the January transfer window, so I suspect it might come then. And then given the success of the FIFA World Cup, that was really fun to take part in and play in, so they will want to bring that back, I think, for that particular competition and reason. But also, first and foremost, Football Manager is a single-player game, so they want to absolutely nail that before they start thinking about the multiplayer features. And as far as I'm aware, because they've not announced it's not going to be in the game, Network Games, which is a multiplayer part, should be in the game from the start. So the only two features I am bummed out about are the touchline shouts and international management. Touchline shouts felt like a really tangible way to have an influence on a match, but as the blog says, a shout should happen instantly, but they only came into effect after the ball had gone out of play, and it also wasn't clear to the players how long the shout lasted for. So basically, they weren't quite working as intended in the game. They will reappear if and when they can do them properly, which does make it sound like it's not a priority. But also, I suspect shouts had like a 0.1% impact on your ability to win a match. So in the grand scheme of things, maybe not as important as it felt like they were. However, I do think that international management is a core gameplay mechanic, and that is going to be a real miss, I think, for FM25. Especially, actually, with women's football coming to FM25. As a man who doesn't pay as much attention to women's football as I should, most of my knowledge of women's football comes from the international scene. Like, for example, I have no idea who Chloe Kelly plays for, but I know she's a baller for England. So I suspect a lot of men are in the same boat as me, and actually playing an international women's save would be quite fun to sort of learn that side of the game a bit more. Particularly if you're in America as well, actually, because the women's American team actually win things compared to the men's team that don't. And Americans like winning. So actually, the American women's soccer team, they get way more views on TV than the men's team do because they actually win. Now, it's still going to be an FM25 mobile, which is pretty cool if you're a mobile player. And for all other versions of the game, it is going to be coming back in FM26, as you can see there in the blog, which is good. Also, in a much more feature-rich way, which I'm very excited about because currently international management is a bit of a weird way to play Football Manager. I mean, you can see here from the sidebar, there's just loads of icons missing. You can't do training. There's no way to see team dynamics. I don't think you have any influence over picking players for the under-18s to start to bring them through to the 21s in the first team. I don't think there's even a way for you to interact with the players. So it's like a really bizarre sort of game mode right now. And actually, when I did the Pentagon Challenge at club level, loads of you said do an international management Pentagon Challenge. And I said, no, I'll wait till FM25 because I suspect at that point it will all be revamped. Obviously, that won't be happening in FM25 now. So I think we'll do it in FM24. So make sure you are subscribed to see that when it comes out. I'm going to have some fun with it and we'll say goodbye to international management for its current state. So I do think the timing of getting rid of international management does suck. However, if they put it into FM25 in the way it currently plays, I think people would be like, come on, Sports Interactive, what are you doing? Why have you not improved this? Whichever way you look at it, there was going to be backlash from someone. It's a lose-lose situation for Sports Interactive, I feel. Back to the overarching point, though, of should we be worried about all these features that are being removed for FM25? I think, again, the issue stems from almost being too transparent with things. I know they've said they want to improve transparency, which is great. I just think they've got a bit too far with it. Would I ever have noticed these things were missing from the game? I mean, probably international management and touchline shouts, yeah, fair enough. But the other stuff, no. And I think the way they've led all the press releases by saying what's being removed first just is a bit odd. I think there would be a lot less backlash and worry within the community if they'd started things out by saying, hey, look at this amazing new thing we're bringing to FM25 that we've built. Look how incredible it is. It's so good, we've had to allocate a lot of our team resources to making it. As a result, we've had to pull back on a few other things. So touchline shouts aren't going to be in the game this year because they don't quite work how we want to, but we've got some better stuff coming along. Something like that, and that would have just changed the whole perspective on things. So I am not worried at all about features being removed from the game. Some of them are coming back and they're going to be better than before, which is great. I just think they've gone the wrong way about announcing things. They have also shown off some screenshots. However, there have been some mixed opinions on those screenshots. So, should we be worried about how FM25 is going to look? First of all, these screenshots are a work in progress. They are subject to change. Now, the fact they're showing us these screenshots does suggest to me that they are pretty much next to confirmed to be that's how they're going to look in the game, but they could always change a little bit down the line. This one is of the new home screen, essentially, that they're calling the portal. Here you have all the important information that you would possibly need. So you've got the agenda on the left-hand side, telling you all the tasks that you have to do before you can press continue, essentially. You've got some contextual information in the middle, like the calendar, fixtures, and the news, which is quite a good way to sort of keep you immersed in your save file by understanding what's going on around you. And then on the right hand side, you've got the new inbox, which is called Messages. Now, currently in Football Manager, you do have a home screen. It looks like this. It's a bit of a cluttered mess on my screen, actually, if I'm honest with you. There's all sorts of stuff on here. But no one ever really uses this screen, I feel. You just kind of load into the screen when you load your save file, and then you're down away in your squad view, or your fixture view, or your finance view, or most of the time, in your inbox. That's where you seem to be most of the time in Football Manager. I think what they're trying to do is trying to merge the homepage and the inbox together so you actually have a hub that you go to quite often to get a lot of information in one place. I have one criticism of this screen, and that's the messages part of it. If it turns out you have to click into a message to read it and then click again to maybe send a player to the physio rather than send them home or to a specialist, that's an extra click. You've then got to click out of that message screen to then click into the next message. And that just feels very excessive. If that is how it's going to work, I will not enjoy that. However, that is just my theory. Obviously, we've not seen actual gameplay, so we have no idea how it's actually going to work. I actually am really frustrated that we don't quite know how it all works together just yet. As a content creator, we do have a direct line pretty much to Sports Interactive's social media team that we can send messages to every now and again. I have asked on a couple of occasions, as early as December 2023, and I've said, can you just get us in to test this game as early as possible? Because we want this game to be great. Now, I know Sports Interactive, along with every other video game company ever, have their own internal QA testing team that do loads and loads of testing all day, every day on new games. But QA testing is very different to an outsider coming in and playing the game and testing things out. I suspect as a QA tester, you are given a brief of what to do on that day and what to look out for and what to test. So you've always got a bit of tunnel vision going into these sorts of things. Now, they are opening this up to public testing in late September, but I think that's a bit too late to actually get some solid feedback that you can make changes on in the game. By this point, I think everything is pretty much finalized. Like, they can't make a big sweeping change if it turns out the public play the game in a completely different way to the designers intended and things have got to change. All I've wanted is to go to Sports Interactive as early as possible, be set up at a desk and a computer, have an eye tracker to track where my eyes are looking on screen to make sure the screen flow works all properly, and to let them know all the pain points I have as a regular player of the game as early as possible so they can sort of fix that. Anyway, I've gone on a tangent there. Back to the original point. I do really like how this screenshot looks. I think it's really clean. Some people say it looks like a mobile game. Personally, I don't agree with that. I think it looks really cool. Maybe that is because mobile games are very clean and accessible for a lot of people, and this is obviously the angle they're sort of going for to make it as accessible as possible to new players of the game. I mean, if you log into Football Manager right now, is this not overwhelming? Look at all of this. It's very overwhelming, right? You don't quite know what you're doing. So the cleaner and simpler they can make it, the less friction it is to new players, and we can get an even bigger, thriving player base going forwards. They've also released a screenshot of the match engine, not the graphics engine, importantly, which I will come on to in a moment. This is just the in-between highlights match screen, and to be honest, I think it does look a little bit cramped and squashed in, but that's because these screenshots aren't in a traditional 16:9 aspect ratio. They're in whatever ratio it needs to be to fit the formatting of their website. So it will end up looking less squished than this and a bit wider, and especially if you've got like a 4K monitor like I play in, there's going to be loads of information on the screen. I am very intrigued by this inclusion of the 2D match engine though. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. More because the way I understand that you play Football Manager right now, in between highlights, it all goes very, very quickly. So if you're just watching the dots move around at 1,000,000 miles an hour in between highlights, doesn't really make for a great viewing experience. So maybe they're hinting here there's a different way to play the game in between highlights. I don't know. As I said, we haven't seen any of the actual graphics engine just yet, and I think there's two reasons for that. Reason one is that they have completely changed it. It's going to look next gen and it's absolutely incredible, and they're waiting for a huge reveal to show us that and wow us. Or option two, which I am 99% sure is going to be the case. It just hasn't changed at all from FM24. As I mentioned earlier, the reason they are moving to Unity is because the UI editor is so good. And obviously, as you can see from these screenshots, they are changing the entire user interface of the game. And that takes an awful lot of time. They've got to put so much focus and attention on that. As a result, I suspect they've just wanted to get the graphics engine working as it is in FM24 in FM25. And so it will look the same, and as they move forwards in future, that's when we're going to start to see these graphical updates. This one is all about the UI and changing everything about that. Going forwards, they'll make tweaks to the UI, but more focus will be put into the graphics engine. Remember, Unity is all about raising the ceiling of what Football Manager can do, including graphics-wise. So down the line, they may well have really realistic graphics, but right now, I think we're not going to see much change. They also talked about this new way to show information, driven by what we call the tile and card system. Right now on a player's profile, you can't really change, too much about all of this. There's not a whole load of customization options on this screen. But if my understanding of the new tile and card system for FM25 is correct, I think you're going to have so much more control over it. On the development update, they've used the last 5 games as an example. So if you don't value this information, you could have it really small on a player's profile like this. But if you think it's really important, you can have a huge tile here on the player's profile giving you all the information, including like how many days ago they played that match where they got an 8.3 rating against Arsenal and won 3-1, right, and scored a few goals in the process. But no matter how big you have these tiles on the player's profile, you can click into each one of these, and then it presents you with a plethora of information, giving you all the detail you could possibly want, including what minute the player scored a goal, what minute they got an assist, when they were subbed off, when they got injured, got booked, even their playing time and if they're happy with their playing time, right? I think this is really cool, and if it works in the way that I've described, again, I've not tested the game or seen the gameplay yet, so I don't actually know. I'm just guessing this is the way it's used. If that is the case, I think it's going to be fantastic. And I'd be really interested to see how different people set up their player profiles depending on how important they value different aspects or information, right? So am I worried about how the game's going to look? No, not at all. I'm actually really excited to explore the new UI and learn it. So I think we've established I'm not actually worried about FM25, and I don't think you should be either. The only thing I've got a slight concern is that we haven't had any public testing very early on in the process to sort of iron out bugs in the new user interface. However, I suspect no game company ever does that, really, so it's probably a bit more of a selfish thing from me, wanting to get my hands on the game early and try and shape it. I want to have an impact on the game. It's my job to play this game on YouTube, right? So I want the game to be as good as it possibly can be. But I've also had the pleasure of meeting a lot of the devs at Football Manager at various events I've been to, and they're not idiots, obviously. Like all these concerns that you and I are having, they'll have thought about, they'll have mitigated it, they'll have planned for it. So it's not, they love playing the game as much as we do, right? They want it to be a good game. So I have plenty of trust in everyone making the game. And like it is going to be fun. I appreciate them being a lot more transparent in these press releases. I think it has backfired a little bit by being maybe too transparent in some areas about delaying the game when did that need to be mentioned? Rather than saying we're removing X, Y, and Z and we're delaying the game to late October, if they just said we're releasing the game in late October, here's some amazing features, I don't think anyone would really be bothered about what's being removed from the game. But I don't know, maybe you think my approach to that is completely wrong and the way FM have done it is perfectly fine. Who knows? Personally, I am really excited for the game and I think it's going to be really big. I cannot wait to get my hands on it and start making content. Will there be things in the game that I don't like? Of course there will be. There is every single year. And of course I will let you guys know what I like and don't like about it when I do get my hands on the game and I can make some videos about it. But until then, I don't think there's any point in us worrying about things that we don't know or can't control.